are as well. Congressman John Hall of New York, 5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand with the other members of my freshman class to support this important resolution. My election and those of my fellow freshman colleagues were an unmistakable signal from the American people. They believe the president's path in Iraq is wrong, and they want new voices to produce change. Mr. Speaker, I am one of those voices, and today I rise to speak with the American people to oppose the president's escalation. The United States requires a new path in Iraq, a path that will deploy our troops out of Iraq, a path that will force the Iraqi government to plan for its own defense, a path that will engage countries throughout the region and around the world to help stabilize and protect Iraq, and a path that will allow the United States military to rebuild and refocus on the important mission of destroying al-Qaeda and defending America from the threat of international terrorism. Sadly, the escalation proposed by the president does none of these things. The president's plan continues down the same path we've traveled for the last 4 years. These years have taught that the U.S. military power alone is not sufficient to stabilize Iraq, yet it is the only tool this president employs. From the outset, this administration has been wrong. The administration led us into a war with flawed intelligence. That is one wrong. The administration went to war without a plan to win the peace. 2 wrongs. This administration chose to protect Iraqi oil fields before securing the ammunition dumps throughout the country. 3 wrongs. This administration sent our troops into harm's way without enough body armor or armored vehicles. 4 wrongs. This administration gave no-bid contracts to its friends and political allies. That's 5 wrongs. Years ago now, President Bush stood on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln before a banner declaring mission accomplished and said, quote, "Major combat operations in Iraq have ended," unquote. That's 6 wrongs. Now this administration wants us to blindly place our faith and the lives of 20,000 more of our troops in an Iraqi government that has failed to meet every security obligation it has pledged. Sadly, once again, this president is wrong, and no amount of wrongs is going to make the president's policy towards Iraq right. It is time for a new kind of escalation on the diplomatic front. A stable Iraq is in the United States' interest and in the interest of Iraq's neighbors. However, the president has done next to nothing to gain the assistance of regional partners. Inside Iraq, the government must meet its promises to reach out beyond its base of support and unite the Iraqi people. Sending more troops into Iraq does nothing to push the Iraqi government towards greater self-reliance. At a time when it is incumbent on the Iraqi government to step up and do more, why should we give them the opportunity to do less? This resolution is an important first step. It voices loud and clear the message America sent last November, and it puts the president on notice. Congress will no longer stand by and allow him to recklessly endanger American lives and security. If the president refuses to change course, this Congress will be forced to act. We will no longer allow him to send under-equipped and underprepared units into combat. We will demand appropriate accounting standards and will no longer allow billions of taxpayer dollars to disappear unaccounted into the rabbit hole of Iraq. And we must not let our National Guard continue to be decimated by repeated and extended activation. I recently met a young man from my district who has been accepted at West Point and will serve as a future leader in the United States Army. I want to ensure that when he graduates from West Point and accepts his commission, the Army he joins will not be decimated by the mistakes in Iraq. I also want to talk about veterans of this war and the unique challenges they will face. I'm proud to be honored to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and proud that one of my first votes in Congress was to provide an increase in VA health care funding. Currently, there's a backlog of nearly 600,000 pending veterans claims at the VA. We must reduce this number so that all veterans can be better served. We must provide funding to better diagnose and treat post-traumatic stress disorder. I am appalled that during this time of war, the administration would cut funding for research on prosthetic technologies that will let our wounded veterans lead more normal lives. My district is the home of West Point Military Academy, and as such has a unique perspective on the war. The leaders that emerge from the halls of that institution are an invaluable resource for our nation. Sadly, we have lost over 50 West Point graduates in Iraq and others in the services from throughout my district. My brother-in-law is a lieutenant colonel who works at West Point. My nephew is a cadet. The courage, devotion, and conscientiousness of the men and women of the United States Military Academy embody the best of America. In the words of the Sheriff of Putnam County, a retired brigadier general, one should never send our armed forces to do a job which is not militarily achievable. I support this resolution and yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young.